Someone want to start the discussion? Anybody have a question they want to raise to Phil, to Megan, to Helga? Yes, she's here. She's in the front row waiting. What you got? By all means.
Throughout the discussions today, an awful lot of it went in for the green movement and a lot of pressure bringing for the CO2 and all that. Does anyone here, this is just a data point, I'm not sure what be able to use it for, be of any use. Have you ever asked where the green movement got their CO2 data? What the basis is for their entire movement, all their theories, all their calculations, everything. The only data they have is from a single NOAA site, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration site, a single sensor on a mountaintop in Hawaii. And if the wind's blowing right, it's downrange of an active volcano. If you check the data information they have, that is the only source they have, and they're trying to adjust the entire world economy and population based on a single questionable data source. Just
thank you. All right.
This is really a wonderful experience. I'm really glad I came. And I think we're all inspired now to go home and to our districts and to do everything we can to get Glass-Steagall pushed through so that we can have the world that we want, the classical music and all of the things that, you know, this is so inspiring. And just, I guess, as a note of practicality, I'm wondering, when we go back to our districts, I know my mind is full now of the possibilities, but we've got to get down to business and get this Glass-Steagall law passed, because nothing will happen without Glass-Steagall. And I know, you know, I've gone into to the different offices, and there's so much, and to talk to the elected officials, like senators and people in office, and I guess, you know, when I go in, my mind is on Glass-Steagall. We need to get Glass-Steagall pushed through, but there's so much information that these people, you know, there's a lot more to it than Glass-Steagall. We've got to get the, it's a three-part solution. And I guess my question is, like, when I'm into their offices, I'm thinking, well, you know, I need to talk to these people and get them to understand all of this, but then there's only so much time and there's only so much that you can say at one time. And so it's really hard for me sometimes to really know the very most important thing to stress with them. Sometimes I think, well, you know, we need to give them the vision of what's possible. So maybe we do need to talk a little bit about NWAPA too, so that they can see that this is the possibility that we could have. But then we can't have NWAPA if we don't have Glass-Steagall. So it's like, just as a note of practicality, what's the very, very best way, you know? Is there anybody that's had a lot of experience with this? So that can give, I mean, I've been into their offices too myself, but it's really frustrating sometimes because they say, yes, we agree with you, but then they don't do anything. So.
Well, I think Lynn always says, don't believe what these people say. Because the first thing is, you know, they have a career, they want to keep their money, they want to, so that they don't tell the truth. And, my experience is that you have to really establish you have to do what Miwa and Jean Sepp did with the Beethoven piece just now. You have to establish your authority from the first note, which many times means you have to scare the shit out of them, And, if you have a person who is well-meaning, then you can be more generous. But if you realize that somebody is not well-meaning, you have to identify that very quickly and without, becoming threatening or, or not nasty or so. But you can get across that this is the Republic of America and that politicians who are not fulfilling the preamble of the Constitution and not respecting the general welfare, they also can be voted out fairly quickly. So I think that the most important, when I talk to these politicians or institutional people, I always tell them the full dimension. I don't limit myself to one subject, Glass-Steagall or Nawapa, or I just tell them, if you don't get this through quickly, civilization is finished. And here we have the danger of fascism, which is coming. The system is about to blow out. We have to get Glass-Steagall very quickly, or else this thing is finished. And if you have your facts together, that you're not, that your subject matter, you can get across very, very efficiently to these people. So my experience is that, you should just do a lot of it, get the experience. The more you do it, the more efficient you become. Take more people with you, take more, what we did in some of these states, where a rural leader would go to their savings and loans guy, and then they would get the trade unionist from the area in addition, and they would go together. I think this is really one of the things where we have the power to build a movement now, because I think that, we have a period between now and the fall at most. I'm not giving a guarantee that we have that much time, but I think that, with all these revelations, we are in a revolutionary, dramatically non-linear period. Every day now you have headlines which you would have not had in a decade before. Like now the EU has been bugged by the NSA, which, I'm not a nasty person generally, but I have certain sadistic joys about certain matters. So anyway, this is causing now a big hoopla, because you're not supposed to do that, to spy on your allies and whatnot. So it's getting funny. I think we have to have a lot of fun in this period. And then, you have all these processes which amplify each other at this point. And I think there is an underground revolutionary rebellion building, because the NSA thing, it took 2 weeks, after this thing blew. But now slowly, we said immediately what it was. First of all, it was not a surprise. And secondly, it's a dictatorship. What do you think it is? What do you think it is if you have a total spying on your own people, on your friends, on your foes? What do you think that is? But it took people a while before they really realized the character of this. And that's just one thing. Then the whole bail-in thing, when that sinks in to people, that is the Cyprus template. So we are in an unbelievable period right now. So I think that come September, all of these congressmen will have to think about their re-election. And if we put enough pressure from the mayors, the city councils, the state legislators, and get in as many institutional people, I thought the message from Omar Paisano from Mexico You know, I mean, you have an orchestra of world people putting pressure on the US Congress that they have to do it. You know, so I think it's a very good example that somebody who is not a legislator, who is not an American, nevertheless can very powerfully make the point of why Glass-Steagall is absolutely necessary. So I think we should do just a lot of these things. You know, and we have, I mean, maybe we shouldn't, we have, maybe you know this, but we have 3 legislation for Glass-Steagall in the Italian Senate and in the House. I mean, 3. It's not bad, it's not nothing. So one has been introduced by Tremonti. Tremonti wrote a very interesting book about white fascism, where it's in Italian, but he basically says this financial system is fascism. It's not brown shirts, but it's white fascism. They have collars, you know, white collars. And he has made very powerfully the argument that to write off these derivatives means nothing. You're not losing anything, because you cannot lose what you never possessed. So he has introduced now Glass-Steagall into the Senate, and we have 2 other bills in the Camera. We are organizing many mayors, city councils, economists. So, I mean, while we are not yet in a position where I could say this country or that country will actually go with Glass-Steagall, but we are preparing the ground so that if the American Congress would go in this direction, everything would fall into place, not without a certain amount of, you know, hoopla and so forth. But I mean, we are trying to prepare people to, you know, catch that moment. So I think just do a lot. I mean, it's like with the music. You have to rehearse a lot to be so good.
Hi. This question is, well, it's regarding Megan's presentation, but any of the musicians would love to hear from. Megan said that there is a right way to perform any given music piece. And you can probably extend that to how to recite any poem or perform a play or whatever. My question is, basically, is there room, given that, and given that as humans we probably can't perform the perfect rendition of anything, you know, being only human, is there room for 2 different or many different interpretations of a work of art to be equally valuable? Or is it, I mean, yeah, I guess that's basically it. So it's not on some spectrum of, you know, worse to better. Is there a room for, I don't know, more room for interpretation, I guess, yeah.
I think that's a very good question. I chose not to read it for time reasons, but there's a really wonderful passage, several wonderful passages from the writings of Wilhelm Furtwängler. And for people who don't know, he was probably one of the greatest orchestral conductors that ever lived. And he was also a profound thinker coming out of the same culture that Einstein and Planck came out of. And the way Furtwängler discusses performance is as improvisation. And he poses the challenge to the performer as having to recreate, in the moment of performance, having to create the unfolding of the composition as an improvisation, which is a very strange idea because you've worked on it and, you know, what do you mean improvisation? You've worked on it, you've memorized the notes, you've worked very hard on every nuance. And yet, in the moment of performance, it has to be as if you were creating it for the first time. And so, as maybe one answer to your question, I would pose that. As maybe another way to answer the question, I would also reference something that LaRouche brings up often, which is that music lies between the notes. And I think many people probably have a reference point for this. If you play music in a formulaic way, and if we write down the right way to play it, as if the right way could be written down in notes, then it's dead. If you play that, if a musician presents that, it's dead. But there is something right about the in-betweenness and about what's done to the mind, which, no, I don't think it'll be identical every time if you're a reductionist and you go back after the fact and measure every sound that came out. No, but that's not where the identity of the composition lies. So anyway, it's a very good question. It's difficult to answer, but that's what I got.
Me? Okay.
I also enjoyed that question quite a bit. I mean, the point is, it's what Phil was talking about, intention. When you play a great work of music, you have an opportunity to spend, after the fact, it was 20 minutes, it was 40 minutes, but you're spending time with a beautiful soul. I mean, you get Mozart's in the room with you. So what's right or wrong? How do you judge better or worse? If you actually take in, small story, I'm convinced Mozart wrote this particular dissonant quartet for the American Revolution. He was, this is from January period of 1785. He shocked the world with the quartet, but the people who played with him, this was at a period, for a month or two, he'd been trying to get involved with a bunch of American patriots in Vienna, around a fellow named Ignaz von Born and a certain, you can call it Freemasonic Lodge, but it was really just the American Revolution group, and all the other lodge guys were sort of crazy, all the other Masonic groupings. Because these guys were scientists, they were metallurgists. The people who played, Mozart had worked on these Haydn quartets, these 6 Haydn quartets for several years. And, but the last 2 of them, which this was part of, he wrote in an intense, very intense couple of weeks. And it was at the time he was being kept out of this American faction grouping by some really dirty tricks. And he broke that stuff open in December, January 1784, 1785. You can almost imagine him having this discussion with these people. He thinks it's important to take their thinking level to, so that they're always mastering paradoxes. They're not just occasionally reaching that level. But let me put it another way. It's unnatural for the world not to have gone with the American Republic back in the 1780s. We busted the British Empire. It's not normal to have that happen and then to just look the other way. And then we have a couple of 100 years of a combined and uneven world. You know, as Lincoln put it, half slave and half free. That's just not normal. And if you look back at that precious period, Mozart was really a key figure for trying to take the level of thinking up among the possible leaders of republics in Europe to the level that they could actually they could destroy feudalism. So right and wrong performances. The problem is we listen to these recordings and we measure them like they're winning the World Series or not winning the World Series or something like that. And the only right or wrong thing about it is there's an intention in the composer's mind. He's a beautiful soul if it's a beautiful piece of music. And you know, we've played these things better, we've played these things worse. But the question is, do you have the intention to meet up with that beautiful soul's standards? And if you do, if you have that intention, there is no wrong performance. If you don't have that intention, it really, you can, you know, I'll stamp on Jascha Heifetz was the one I like to pick on for being a perfectionist technically, and I just hate listening to anything he plays. You know, he was better as a car mechanic working on his Mercedes-Benz, you know, in terms of getting perfect machinery. So I hope the combination of presentations for the day certainly makes that point that within every one of you, you have the capacity to be the leader. We have the need for you to be that type of leader. And there's no difference between the musical work, the getting Glass-Steagall in all its ramifications. You know, it's just we're just missing the language to be able to express that most of the time. And there are a few precious golden souls, you know, who we should have as much time as possible with them. And if you have the intention to honor them and to take in all the challenges they're putting in front of you, you'll have a fine performance.
Now, this goes hand in hand with something really delightful today that people that were not in the chorus, they don't know. But because what Mihua said before we got started, she said, I only want to tell you one thing, organize.
I want to thank everybody for the great day. This has been a very, very inspiring, eye-opening event. And I'm so impressed with the musicians, just unbelievable. And the question I have to end the evening is, what about the conservative talk show people like the Mike Levins and the Sean Hannitys and the Fox Newses and all those folks? Why do we never hear them talk about LaRouche?
Actually, a funny part of this is my brother is a radio talk show fan, and and I once had a horrible argument with him because I said all you do is listen to Rush Limbaugh, and he said, "You see, you're totally wrong. You know nothing about what I do. I only listen to the Baltimore area conservative talk shows." So I think what you get from this kind of thing, most of these guys frankly are not real. They're media hype. You know, this is one of the big problems in this. We'll get the media as a revolution unfolds. These guys are like Fox Television. They're owned lock, stock, and barrel by Rupert Murdoch and everything that he stands for. Australia, the British Commonwealth, really a British figure. Most of these guys, for example, are Austrian school on economy. That's another thing that's a whole other story, but that's what they are. They don't believe in any government. Von Hayek wrote a book called The Road to Serfdom. The road to serfdom was government. Now, here's what you have to ask yourself about these guys, whether they're owned or they're just off the wall. And of course, they're terrified of LaRouche. They've been told, stay away from him. You know, you ruin your career. Even the ones who might be a little local and a little bit more honest, they're scared off of this stuff completely. But what's the idea of no government except for the army and the police? Now here's what really always gets me in this topic. The people who ruined the country, visibly, the insane bubbles, one after another, particularly hitting a point in the 90s and then with 99. We're in the middle of another bubble. The stock market is a bubble. That's the whole thing is another speculative bubble. They've taken all of the bailout money so far, and they've invested it in making their money grow. And that's all they do. Now, so how is it that the private banks brought us disaster? And we're sitting here believing that the problem is government. The problem was too little government. They took Glass-Steagall down. They took regulation down. Government is, in a republic, and this was Kuza's point, is by the consent of the governed. You create a situation where it's by consent of the governed. And what we see in this is the tragedy is, so far, it's been the consent of the governed. They bought it one more time. And so a lot of well-meaning people in the Tea Party and considering themselves conservative or even considering themselves liberal are way off the wall. We still have liberals who will tell you, I voted for Obama, he hasn't done anything, he hasn't helped any black people, but I just can't see getting him out. And I'm not sure, I still like the idea that he's an African-American president. People will buy, and I'll tell you, some people you can sell them the Brooklyn Bridge on Monday, buy it back on Tuesday, and sell it to them again on Friday. And I think that's the problem with most of these talk show guys.
Let me just add something very short on that same topic, because as you know, I do a lot of radio. And one thing that most of these people don't understand is this question of what is a human being. And one of the things I often say to them is that human rights are innate. They're given to us by our Creator. But who defends human rights? Human rights have always been innate, but most of history has been tragedy, tyranny, oligarchy, barbarism, slaughter. It was Cousé's idea, enacted as the American Revolution, that established a government that would protect those human rights. And if you don't have a government to protect those human rights, which is made up of human beings, you have nothing. And I think this is something that a lot of the people who profess to be right-wingers, that argument doesn't impress them, but other people who are listening to them realize what frauds they are. Because human history, Lynn always says you can't learn anything from experience, except this is something you can learn from experience. That unless we have institutions to protect us that come from some higher set of principles that are knowable to man, we have nothing. And that's what government's supposed to do. So that's how I answer these questions with right-wingers.
Well, I think that brings the day nearly to a close, so I'd just like to invite Helga up. Would you like to say closing? Yeah, I'd like to invite Helga up to say some closing remarks. Before I do, we do have as I said, a cadre school tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the Doubletree Inn. The person that presented had laid the foundation this afternoon in the chorus with the double bass, and he'll lay the foundation for revolution in economic science. And in the current historical period tomorrow, it's Bruce Director. So I definitely encourage people to attend. So, any other announcements? All right, then let me introduce Helga Zepp-LaRouche.
Well, I actually would like to also say something about this question of the best or better performance. How do you judge this? I think there are possible many interpretations for the very reason that I personally go always with the judgment of these things by the standard of Friedrich Schiller, who from all the people I have ever read or looked at has really the highest standard. I mean, I'm not saying that Beethoven doesn't have an equally high standard like Schiller, but but Schiller has articulated it in writing or in words, insofar that he says that the artist is so important for the effect he has on the people that he should not dare to move his audience if he has not ennobled himself to be, at least for the moment of the performance, an ideal human being. And that the only way how an artist can be sure of what is the effect of his performing is that he has to be a universal being, idealizing himself. And idealizing with Schiller does not mean to have some idealistic idea, but to bring out the real inner self. That he means by an ideal human being. and at the same time addressing what is universal in the audience, and only this way you can be sure of the effect. Now, he also said that the only thing an artist can give to the public, to the audience, is his individuality. And that individuality should be worth to be presented. Now, I find this a very high standard, and everybody who has ever tried to even recite a poem or perform some music knows that when you do this, even if you are a top professional, you still give your soul. I mean, when you get this idea between the notes, or to really get into the beautiful soul of the composer and recreate it in a spontaneous way, you give something from your most inner thoughts, and that is not easy. I mean, that's not something, it's not like, reading an accounting book or, doing some other statistic formulations, but you open your soul. And I think I would like to just say, it's no question that we are going into extremely tumultuous times. I mean, I cannot tell you exactly what all will happen because, we don't have crystal balls, but I can promise you it will be tumultuous. And I think the only way how we are going to do the mission which we have agreed to adopt is we have to become beautiful souls, all of us. And, I think people don't pay enough attention to their souls. They polish their shoes, they go into the fitness room and they get big biceps, and, you can see people do all kinds of crazy things, like some men say, you have to move your arm, that it comes out here and not here. And they do this one machine for, so they pay enormous attention on all kinds of things, but they neglect the beauty of their souls. And I would like to really say, I mean, I'm so convinced that the aesthetical education of Schiller is absolutely crucial, and because if you don't make people more human, if we don't make people more aesthetically educated, and that takes many forms. I mean, when you have a beautiful concert, you don't run in and out the door, and you don't pay attention how much noise you generate when the door slams. It's little things like that, and it's an appreciation for beauty. It's the idea that you have to, you have to develop this fineness of the soul, which this present culture has completely stamped out. People have been made two-dimensional. They have been flattened. And the reason why it is so important to pay attention to lyrical poetry, which is sort of like the most fragile flowers of all, or the lied, or certain other compositions, it's because you have to develop this absolute fineness of your soul, which is the Empfindungsvermögen Schiller is talking about. It's the idea to be open, to take the whole world into your heart, but not in a Schwärmerei kind of way, but in an educated way. This is what Schiller explains in the aesthetical education, why the so-called Formtrieb and Spieltrieb and Stofftrieb, Leni probably knows the English translations. The Stofftrieb is the ability of you taking in the whole world, of not being closed, of being able to be sensitive to the passion, or having passion for the suffering of people, for new discoveries, just being completely open. Now, if you are only open, then you go all over the place and get nowhere. So therefore, Schiller says you have to have the form drive, which is the possibility to make concepts, to form Gestalts, to form Geistesmassen out of all of these things you absorb. Now, he says as much damage has been done in history by having too little formation, as well as to do it too early, and people who too quickly have a category and say, oh yeah, I know this is this. he says history has been retarded much more by those people who too quickly close the mind and say, now I know what it is, yeah, this belongs in this drawer. And he says you have to develop both of these, and man is only really free where he plays. And the way how he discusses playing is not, just some arbitrary monopoly or some, but playing means exactly training this faculty of the mind where new things can be discussed or can occur. How do you form a new conception? How do you go beyond something which you just study and you take something which has been created already, but how do you train your mind to be a discoverer of some new physical principles, or some new musical composition, or some new drama, or poetry, or whatever? And I think that I don't think we can solve it tonight, but I would like you to take this home and consciously think, how can you become a more beautiful soul, a more creative human being, so that you are of more use to your fellow human beings? And also, how can we create a humanist culture? How can we treat each other, minimum according to the principle of the Peace of Westphalia, to enjoy the creative development of the other? I mean, we must make sure this organization is the temple of liberty and the beacon of beauty which radiates so that people want to join it. And I think, when the beautiful musicians were performing today, I mean, that gives you a sense, but that has to become also the standard of our political culture. So anyway, I just think that, the individuality, you have to not just be the way you think you are, but polish yourself. Think of how to become a more beautiful human being and have a more beautiful soul. And then you have the strengths, the inner strengths, to cope with everything. Because when your soul is growing and you become more compassionate and you become more agapic and more loving and more, more of a human being, then nothing can destabilize you. It's really the inner strengths, which is the... Schiller discusses this in these papers about the sublime, where he says human beings are fragile human beings. Any elephant is stronger, any bear is more courageous and ferocious. But if a human being connects his own identity to principles which go beyond its mortal existence, you can become morally secure. Physically, you may still be fragile and vulnerable, but this inner security is something you can work on and you can accomplish. And when you have this level of the sublime, well, then you are free. And I think this question of freedom, which is trampled upon so much in this period, I mean, look, if you look at it, where do we have freedom in the world? Not in America, not in Europe, for sure not in Africa. Maybe there are some countries where you have a little bit of freedom, but I don't see a lot of it. So how do we, out of this extremely difficult historical moment, develop the inner strength so that we save mankind out of this mess? I mean, if you think about it, it's not an easy thing. And we need more people who have the quality or the self-demand of developing that kind of a leadership, like what Lynn exercises, every day. I mean, he's not a spring chicken anymore, which he mentioned this morning, but he's still, every morning, getting up with the absolute determination to make a creative contribution that day. And not just some arbitrary thing, but something which is helping to solve the problem of understanding of the people, so that he contributes the best he can. And we need more people like that. We need more people who have that high standard of being selfless in one sense, No ego. Ego is a terrible thing. Whenever I see an ego, I think, oh my God, what a lost case. Because ego stands in the way of being the kind of person which is needed. And, we need more people who are strong but not ego-driven. We need people who are willing to take leadership for this poor human race, which right now is almost lost. But given the fact that, I definitely believe Leibniz was right, that a great evil produces an even greater good. So therefore, I'm an optimist. So, despite the fact that if I look at the world, it looks terrible. But I think we can absolutely make it. And I think the fight of the last several months in the United States has given an enormous amount of hope to many, many people in the world. And you should be proud of it. So let's just continue this way with the absolute determination that we have to win, because there is no other acceptable outcome of this present moment, but it means more people have to take this step of commitment, and all of you should obviously join and do the maximum best to help to spread it. We have to multiply. I would like to see out of this very successful conference we had here today in San Francisco, I would like to see an explosion of organizing. I would like to see next conference 1,000 people or more. I would like to see a membership drive, an explosion of organizing where each of you basically, recruits 5 people a week. Why shouldn't it be possible in this moment? I have seen even in Germany a change. Unbelievably, Germany is the most pessimistic country I know. But even there, things are changing. So there is hope.